Hello and welcome to the Creativity Podcast. This is a series where we take a look at how creative people relate to and understand creativity itself. I'm your host, Nick Cook, and with me today is Ollie Teeba. Ollie is a music producer who's best known for his work with Herbaliser and with Soundside, as well as his exploits as a DJ. So hello Ollie, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Ollie, what does creativity mean to you?
Meaning is, what does it mean? I don't know if I know what it. I certainly think of it as something that every human being on the planet has creativity in them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a case of sort of unlocking it, which is, that's an environmental kind of discussion.
Environmental?
Sorry?
How do you mean environmental?
No, your environment rather than the environment, but your environment will be something that will influence, contribute, and in certain cases will allow you that creativity, because sometimes people certainly could be creative, but they lack the means, time, or the they don't have the luxury of the time or the financial support.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to be an artist traditionally, most people who were artists and musicians were people from, one would assume, fairly affluent families where they didn't actually go and get a real job.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt that is a factor.
Mm-hmm.
How much financial support, financial security you have in your life that allows you the time to put into being a poet or being a playwright or being a musician or an artist. Like, I never had any music schooling because my parents would never have been able to afford that. So I had to unlock my creativity in a different way. And I think it's also something that's, it's degrees as well. There are degrees of creativity. Like,
okay,
you could be creative when you're cooking your dinner. You could be creative when you're sat in a studio making music or making art. There's you could be creative in the way you dress, the way you present yourself.
So what do you think it is? What do you think it is that kind of differentiates those sort of levels? So what makes, what's the difference between a Damien Hirst and someone who's very, very good in the kitchen, for example?
I don't know. I mean, I think how much there's a certain amount of how, as well as your personal situation allowing you the time or money to invest in something, I think there's also allowing yourself, because I think a lot of people go through life and say, well, I'm not creative. But then you could go, well, actually you are, because look, I've just seen you, make this delicious meal. You didn't just read it from a cookbook. I'm trying to think of another sort of everyday example.
Yeah, well, cookery is a good one.
I was thinking of this last night. It was the one thing that I was thinking of, that creativity exists in all of us, and we apply it all the time without even, thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it's also, I suppose, one of the fundamental things that is kind of obvious is that it's kind of the opposite of reactive.
Okay, how do you mean?
Well, because when you create something, other people react to it. Like art is supposed to create. Essentially, a lot of creativity is designed to create a reaction in somebody else.
Yeah.
Although, it's not necessarily, because my mum spends a lot of time in her garden. That's a creative process.
Yes, very much.
Largely for her and herself, and not for other people. And that's a big part of my own creativity. Is I have to. There's definitely a balance in, especially if you're in a position where you can or have at one time, which is in my case, made a living from creativity. Yes, then other people are a big factor, but then how much power you give them is, because if all I do is think about what do people want, then that's, I'm misleading myself when I think if people are interested in creativity that comes from me, it comes from me purely for, I essentially will make the music that I want to make, and if other people get on board, then that's great.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there that make music for a particular audience, and I suppose once you establish an audience, then you start to think of, well, in fact, I remember having conversations with band members in the Herbaliser, where the opinion was mooted of, we should really think about what it is that people like about us and give them that.
Isn't that a little dangerous?
No, I believe the absolute opposite.
Oh.
That is where you destroy it. When you start trying to guess what it is your audience wants from you and give it to them, that's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my personal feeling about it, and I may change that point of view, but I've held that point of view for quite a while, because that's the kind of person, like, I didn't want to, some people get into making music because they see it as an avenue to service their own ego. A lot of people, do movies, acting, all sorts of creative endeavours as a means to make themselves famous, to make themselves significant in a world of 8 billion people. That's never been a motivation for me. I mean, obviously, I kind of, I would like it. I like it when people notice something that I've done and like something I've done. But the idea of everyone on, there are people in this world that are like not happy if they thought that there was a single human being on the planet who didn't know who they were, and that's not.
Yeah, it's almost psychotic, isn't it?
Extreme. That's an extreme.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly when you're as famous as many people, and also with social media and the way people are, their fame is exploding into monumental proportions, and instantly sometimes, like someone who was nobody yesterday could be the most famous or infamous person today. Do you think
that the people that pursue creative pursuits for the sake of that kind of money and fame and so on, I mean, do you think that limits what they're able to do in any way?
I mean, I think I wouldn't certainly say, because I wouldn't say that merely the fact that you are very interested in being famous doesn't necessarily negate that you will create something noteworthy, because there's that talent could have either existed before the need to be famous, or it could just have grown in tandem with that. And, I mean, a lot of people feel the need to be, something in a world, full of so many people that, just like if you paint on the, that was what graffiti was kind of about.
Because you started out as a graph writer, didn't you?
Well,
in a sense.
I mean, I was a b-boy first and a graph writer, which were the things that you could do without really having any money. But once I wanted to be a DJ, and I had to get a job because you can't just, records are quite difficult to steal, whereas paint cans, although I was never really that keen, I did buy some of my paint, but that was a big part of what American New York subway graffiti was about, is that you could be some kid from the Bronx, ostensibly nobody in the world, but you could write your name on this train and they would go all over the city, and then people would go, who's this?
Yeah.
Who's this? And so I think it's just, for me, it's not a big motivator, but obviously it's part of it, because I think if I was making stuff and no one had ever listened to, I have a lot of the pressure taken off me because a lot of people used to listen to me. And
I'm still.
I wish people still did, but I'm not. There's lots of people that you see that are making stuff, and like I see a lot of people on social media, guys who make beats or guys who DJ, moaning about how they can't get any cut through. And I can completely understand that would be extremely frustrating, but for me, I always come back to this principle, which is my idea of success is to make something that I feel proud of,
and
pleased with, and that it's as good as I want it to be, or feel I'm capable of making it. And if other people like it or don't like it is another thing altogether.
So you mentioned this idea of cut through. So what do you think differentiates those who get cut through and those who don't? Is it just luck, or is it connections, or is it some kind of ability?
It's all of those things.
Yeah.
I've even though I've always felt a certain amount of luck is involved. Like I felt that Jake and I, when we started making records with Digitude, and then they started to kind of reach people, and people were noticing it, really liking it, feeling pretty lucky, because although I'm like, I believe in what we're doing, I think it's good, the fact that it was reaching people, it wasn't just down to the fact that the music was good, it's the fact that we got ourselves signed to the right label at the right time, making the kind of stuff we were, because I wasn't sitting around thinking, what does the world need? It needs trip hop. We're going to make trip hop, because none of us ever thought we were making trip hop. And I know you're about the. I don't know if there was a whole Twitter rage thing about some interview that James Lavelle did. Where
no, I've not heard of it. Well, what?
It invented trip hop, and I'm like, and loads of people who are beefing about it and going, oh well. These people were first, and I mean. Well,
no one person ever invents anything, do they? And it just doesn't work like that.
Exactly. One thing begets another thing, and
it's just a big mess that all collides at the same time.
See someone doing something, they go, "I'm going to have a go at doing that or something like that," and then they put their little spin on it, and then other people see them, and then they put their bit on. And then you end up with a thing, a movement, if you like. But I think that when we connected with Digitude, what I really wanted to do was make a hip hop record with rappers.
Yeah.
Right? But in 1994, there'd been, I probably covered a lot of this stuff in the other interviews, but maybe not. In 1994, there were no labels that seemed to be interested in signing rap acts. I think a lot of the industry in general, like the music media and the overwhelming idea seemed to be, we kind of had a crack at UK rap, with the music of life and the this and the that, and we moved on from that. And even a lot of those artists were doing other things. They weren't trying to cut rap songs, because there wasn't really, people weren't that interested in UK rap at that time. Not at least, I'm not saying there was no audience for it. There certainly was, but there was no support from labels or media. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of like, well, I can still apply these skills, the skill set I have in making beats and scratching, and we'll just try and make it interesting as an instrumental kind of version.
Yeah.
That's all we did, and that we kind of got lumped. And I guess there were other people doing similar things, and then other undefinable things, and we all kind of got lumped into this box that was considered a genre, but wasn't really, because on one end of the spectrum you'd have someone like me just making rap songs without rappers, and then the other end you've got someone making something like ambient music. If the All had come out in 1994, they would have been called trip hop. Because 89, 90, it was considered sort of ambient experiment, and even all these same acts that were called trip hop, a couple of years later they were being referred to as electronica, or a couple of years later eclectica. Because trip hop was never really a thing. Anyway, that's, again, we've got off track there. I'm just saying that, the whole thing with Ninja Tune, there was no plan there that this I've looked at all the labels and this is the label that we need to target because they're going. No, we sent a tape to them, but they liked it.
Yeah.
Went on, and that was really lucky. We sent the tape to a label, and they responded to it, and then it all just fell into place from there. But it was a lot of hard work from them, building, a camp of artists that kind of fit together, but were different, and it was the thing done at the right time, and it boosted all of our careers. So that part of it was absolute luck, but yes, of course, you still have to have, you have to have talent, because timing is everything. If you do something before people are ready for it, which most of the creative pioneers of the world are ahead of the curve, and people see it. Or,
I mean,
I don't get it. And then a few years later, someone basically imitates it in some way, and they make it just a little bit more accessible, or just some other stuff that's happened in between.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Get it, and then that person is the one that becomes the well-known one, and the pioneers often don't get the credit until after.
It's strange how that happens, isn't it?
It makes sense. It makes sense that it happens that way, because that's the essence of it, I guess, is that you have ideas that are not common to the everyday. And so when you first, even just like political ideas and all of these things, when you first present them, someone will do or say or create something at the right time, and it just catches the public's imagination, and then everyone else follows. It's like Star Wars. George Lucas took that shit to so many different studios.
Yeah,
no one was into
they didn't want to get behind it, did they?
Space movies are too expensive. No one's really into them.
Sci-fi's dead.
2001 was kind of like fantastic, but these other space movies, the world's moved on, and he was like, but no, I really believe in this idea, and this is a unique, way of looking at, and of course there was it's entirely made up of samples that he's taking from other.
Yeah, of course. Flash Gordon, that sort of thing.
And exactly, the sort of Saturday morning pictures serial thing. Kurosawa, Metropolis, you name it. There's loads and loads of stuff in there that's put together in a particularly unique way.
Yeah.
That had that Alan Ladd Jr. not decided to run with it. Yeah, I mean, and then of course it's a massive hit, and then everyone wants Star Wars. Yeah, I mean that's the problem also with creativity and something becoming a massive thing.
Yeah,
is industry. Creative industries are not creative in their nature. So they're reactive.
An oxymoron, would you say?
Well, they react to the creativity that someone else has produced, and then rather uncreatively think, can't you do this thing? And then they want you to repeat the formula that somebody else has done, when in fact that's exactly, it's only when someone is reacting against that you get something new.
Yeah.
Like I remember there was a discussion that was floating around, and I probably get it completely wrong because it's 25 years or more, but I remember around the time that Mowax was bought up by A&M, I think.
I don't know.
A&M. But Mowax was an indie,
yeah.
Like Ninja was a small little indies, and then a major bought up Mowax. Whilst James Lavelle still ran it, but of course there's now big money backing.
Yeah.
And some suit, I believe this is the story. Some suit from A&M or whatever the major label was turns up at Mowax offices, or a bunch of artists are invited over to the whatever. There's a bunch of artists are brought in to see some suit. I'll just call them a suit. And that person then sort of is playing the things that were having, the sort of chart kind of success that were in the ballpark, so they were playing the tricky and things like that. It was tricky and had some hits, and saying, can you make your next record like this thing or that thing? I mean, yeah, look, I totally get it from a point of view of making money. It's easier to sell the thing that people are already into and want more of. That is completely understandable, but it's like the opposite of a creative person's instinct is to create something different, or at least if they're gonna take someone else's idea and run with it, they're gonna put their own spin on it.
Yeah.
But obviously, everyone's different. Some people are a bit more original than others, but yeah.
So how is it? Just changing track a little bit. So, how do you think of creativity on a more kind of practical, personal level? If you're, when you're making music, when you're thinking about making music, when you're DJing, how is your sense of creativity? How does that guide you when you're doing that?
Different ways. It really depends. I mean, my whole ability to make music stems from DJing, but essentially, just from the turntables, having two turntables. I started with, I want to learn how to do the scratching thing, and I want to also blend different records together, mix different records together, and so that you get in. First of all, you get a sense of rhythm and tempo. Then you start to count bars, because you start to go, oh yeah, I know where it's going to change because it's always this many bars. So you start off, so everything starts off sort of from a rhythmic point of view, and then you get a sampler and you start putting bits together. And just like when you were trying to mix records together, you realise that certain things are not in tune with certain things go together nice, and certain things don't, because
it can be a great education, a musical education, being a DJ, can't it? For the to learn about things like musical structure and energy and chord progressions, that type of thing, keys.
Well, yeah. See, it doesn't teach you chord progressions. That is the theory part, where I've had to be really disciplined with myself to try, because for years, when we're doing the Herbaliser, like, I'll be working in the studio with people that had varying degrees of music theory.
Mm-hmm.
So I can sort of come up with my ideas and bring in the samples, or put together rough beats and bring them in, and then people would be able to figure out musically, harmonically what's doing, and then come up with ideas that harmonically worked well with that. And I kind of, because I kind of was always a little bit flunked by it all, didn't really try. I mean, I sort of knew, which keys are which on a keyboard, but I'm still kind of slowly but surely teaching myself, music theory. But in terms of like just coming up with ideas, what I don't do is I don't go upstairs and sit down at a keyboard and start trying to come up with ideas.
Yeah.
I have an idea, and then I go in the studio
Mm-hmm.
and try and create that idea. I can't imagine what it must be like for someone who writes, like jingles for adverts and stuff, and they just kind of got to sit. Although a brief, when you're working to a brief, that helps, because that's even before I made music, I leaned more towards graphic design when I was studying art at college, because there was a much clearer brief as to what, like a fine art brief seemed a little bit, less, I like restrictions and boundaries. They help, they help exclude stuff.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you've just got, there's too many things you could do, and it's kind of about excluding a bunch of them, so you can then, you've got a shorter list.
So the spark that you go into the studio with is that, effectively.
But yeah, when I'm out and about, my brain is, I find it quite difficult to switch my brain off. That is definitely a thing for me. But whatever I'm doing, whether I'm listening to some music, watching television, or watching a movie, or reading a book, or just sitting around watching the world go by, that's where I generate ideas. I don't generate the idea in the studio. I have the idea.
So it's not like a switch you can just turn on and off.
It can come from anywhere. It can come from anything that might. But sometimes, in the case of when you're doing sampling and making sort of hip hop beats and stuff, it's quite simple. You just go digging, you listen through records and collect various bits that sound, with little bits that are like. And I just collect stuff, there's masses of stuff that I'm like, I'll sample that one day. And look, actually, I'm going to completely contradict myself now. Sometimes I go in the studio and I don't know what I'm going to make, but I'll just pick a record that I've got in a pile of records that I know I separated in that had pieces. And then I'll take that one piece and then let all the ideas explode from that.
So in a way, I mean, that's still it's kind of actively looking out for the spark of an idea rather than have one emerge organically, Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think certainly with music, ideas that come to me, I'll try and figure out how, even if they're not a musical idea, I'll I'll try and figure out how
Yeah.
fit that into a musical idea. Or I'm listening to bits of, like, particularly if I'm, because my music's quite hip hoppy. Not every track I make is a hip hop track, but on the whole, it certainly leads heavily into that sound. And so what I'm often doing is looking for samples or musical styles from the past.
Yeah.
That you don't necessarily usually hit, because if you took 100 hip hop records, you'll find that most of them are sampling jazz records, soul records, punk records, some rock records, but you'll see a lot of stuff and a lot of sounds overrepresented. And it very much is the thing, like, as I was saying earlier, about when someone breaks through particularly well with a particular kind of sound, then everyone else kind of sound like them. And that's quite easy to do sometimes with sampling, because you just start looking for the kind of samples that they use.
Yeah.
And then partway there, and my whole thing, and it's not like the Herbaliser was the only group that used, like, cinema score kind of. That was something that was a big part of my musical influence, because that's not to say no one else in the group was in, but I was really into, when I was a kid, before I ever heard hip hop, I was really into film music.
Yeah.
I like pop music like everyone else, but I found film music particularly, like John Barry, James Bond soundtracks were the first thing I could really remember, and Star Wars obviously, but I remember really being into James Bond music. And my mum would sometimes buy me records from Woolworths, and in fact I figured a particular thing was, if I was homesick from school, and my mum, she had to go and do some shopping and leave me in the house all on my own, by my lonesome, which you're not allowed to do anymore. When I'm like 8 years old, she would always dip into Woolworths and pick up some, space movie themes by Jeff Love and his orchestra, or someone else in their orchestra. And so I got really into those records and these, because she knew I was into, like, Star Wars and movies and things, and so she would bring home these sort of compilations of film themes. And so that really is a big influence on what kind of gets me going musically.
Yeah, and you can hear that in Herbaliser as well very clearly.
Exactly. That's kind of where we were able to stand out, is we kind of lead, like I say, not the only people to use cinematic influence in music, but we really lean heavily into it. Whereas, I hear a lot of beat makers that don't sound original because they're always looking in the same box as their favourite producers, whereas I'm always looking for something unusual that I can flip into hip hop. It's not always soundtrack music, sometimes it's just weird shit, but I'm always looking for weird shit. I want to make a beat that doesn't sound like anyone else's beat. Granted, I definitely make beats that sometimes sound, not a million miles away from everyone else's stuff, but yeah, I'm always looking for things that are odd.
Yeah.
But then, that's, I guess, bringing it back to what I was saying, it's just about, I have an idea and it just comes to me, and I'm like, how can I manifest this idea? And it might just be a concept. Manifest it in my medium, which is
right, and that seems like a good place to wrap up. So thank you once again to my guest Ollie Teeba. So Ollie, if people want to go and find out a little bit more about you and have a listen to what you've been doing, where can you point them?
I've got Ollie Teeba Mixcloud page, which has got all sorts of different DJ mixes that I've done for shows. In fact, I've just got a new 45 Live mix on the latest 45 Live Dub Lab show, which is on SoundCloud or Mixcloud.
Awesome.
I forget which. And also there's Ollie Teeba on Instagram, Facebook. I don't have an Ollie Teeba website, and I'm not really signed to a label at the moment. So,
well, there's plenty of Herbaliser stuff still floating around YouTube and things like that as well. I'll stick some links in the description for anyone who wants to go and check that out. So I've been Nick Cook. This has been the Creativity Podcast. Thank you again, Ollie Teeba, and until next time, goodbye.